because it was like CNN is the baby face. They are telling the American public what a crook our president really is.
You know, generally when I see a response video on YouTube and you see "don't bully or harass this user," I feel a collective sigh, a groan, some massive, deafening, no shit moment that should go without saying. But in this case, I'm gonna go one better. This is JimCornette. He runs the best podcast known as JimCornette's Drive-Thru, and he also has another show called The JimCornette Experience. That's the one we're going to talk about today. Brief backstory, this is JimCornette. He's 55. He's been working with wrestling in some way, shape, or form since he was 14, with such duties as serving as a photographer, ring announcer, timekeeper, magazine correspondent, and public relations correspondent. To say nothing of back in 1982 when he was finally tapped to be a manager, and I believe, and I could be wrong, his first gig was when he worked with Sherry Martel, aka Scary Sherry, aka Sensational Sherry, who regretfully passed away when she was 49 back in 2007. I haven't followed pro wrestling in over 10 years. For context, I stopped watching about the same time that Chris Benoit lost the strap to Randy Orton. I couldn't tell you if that was the first or last time that happened. JimCornette is a capable man who can keep a topic that's been dead to me interesting and engaging. And why I respect the man and can say he was one of the best managers, maybe only second to Bobby the Brain Heenan, a comment I imagine he would likely agree with. Sometimes his opinions and thoughts differ from mine. I'm gonna grab a clip here. This is the JimCornette Experience, episode 188. And before we get going, I understand Jim is a pro wrestling personality that gives him certain liberties with the truth, to play up his personal opinions, to put a little razzle-dazzle, a little showmanship. But in this same show, Jim talked how he was stepping away from pro wrestling in his next performance.
Uniting with Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, the Midnight Express, for photo ops on Saturday at the WrestleCade Fan Fest, and we'll be having a very special, let's just say, Smoky Mountain Wrestling related function on Sunday morning to close out what's going to be a great weekend, Thanksgiving weekend, and that pretty much could be the last time that I manage, because I'm thinking that's 35 years in September. I'm not as young as I used to be. I don't want to be one of those people that just hangs on and wanders out there.
The statement he made about CNN didn't seem relevant to hyping his match or selling tickets, so that's why we're here.
Speaking of pieces of shit, we've left Trump alone for the past few weeks on the program. But last week, isn't it amazing? Wrestling is getting more publicity than it's ever gotten in the history of wrestling, and yet it's more unpopular than ever before, and fewer people are actually watching or going to the matches. But the fucking tweet that he sent out, some guy made it, of Trump, it was the clip of Trump, you've seen it, Trump tackling Vince at WrestleMania, whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
And beating him up, but Vince's head was superimposed with the CNN logo, so it was Trump beating up CNN.
Now, to be fair to Jim, he said he'd be amused if this had been Obama doing this to Fox News. That's not really the point I'm getting at. I'm going to give a link to the whole podcast down below. This is what I wanted to get to. Jim, I give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe you were tired, hungover, sick. Maybe you missed something. You do understand that CNN literally threatened to dox some kid for tweeting a joke. You think that CNN is the good guy. If I may, I'm going to grab a clip of 5 YouTubers who've already tackled this topic fairly well. The links will be down below. Did you miss something, or did you decide to argue in bad faith?
Wrong. Then they'll attempt to leak his docs. So it's called, for those of you who don't understand, that's, real identity and so forth. His address, his name, maybe his social security number. So I'm sure CNN would love to ruin his life. The idea behind this is that CNN is threatening to ruin his potential career and education in the future should he speak out against their bullying him. This user didn't bully CNN. He posted a funny meme on the internet. It happened to be retweeted by the President of the United States. Now, if CNN wants to say that Trump did something wrong, if they want to, and they did, they called that into question for several days. That's okay, that's legitimate. I may not agree with that, but it's a politician you're talking about. He's an adult, an elected official, public representative. Okay, go ahead and smear him all you want, because he's the President of the United States and it's your right to do so. You may be dishonest in why you want to do that. You don't want to tell your audience that the reason is because he didn't take your funny money and run with it, and he won't give you special interview treatment and things like that, and actually puts you in your place. in order to make room for people who run like podcasts and have blogs, because that's the new media that's rising up right now, and Trump has the gift of foresight and realizes that the communication age is leaning now towards social media and away from cable. You may not be honest about your reasons for lambasting Trump, but at the very least, going after some random person on the internet, not a great idea.
I'll make sure to include your Twitter down below so we can encourage your clarification. The thing I find preposterous, I know Brian Last tends to be a bit more on the ball in these situations, and there he was nodding his head, jerking you off. I expected better. I guess I'm going to have to lower my expectations.
And the verified Twitter lefties are just going nuts. Absolutely fucking nuts. And yeah, they didn't give a shit about this, obviously. I mean, this wasn't incitement or anything like that. And like, this wasn't a problem. It was just a Republican being shot by a left-wing radical who, by their own arguments, they would say has been radicalized by the left-wing media, delegitimizing Trump and inciting violence against him. I mean, it's not like left-wing actors and celebrities and various other personalities are constantly making jokes about assassinating Trump. And it's not like there haven't been people who have tried, both of them being left-wing activists who failed on the merits that they're fucking useless. Not because they weren't trying, but because they just weren't very good at assassinating people.
And at the same time, I can see where people thought it was kind of funny. If it had been Barack Obama, of course, Obama would have never put himself in any of these positions because he was a dignified, intelligent man. But if it had been Obama tackling Fox News, you know, and I would have popped. But the problem that I have, our priorities are so backwards. Our fucking cognitive abilities have been turned upside down. We look at everything, or a lot of people look at everything completely backwards these days. Because it was like CNN is the baby face. They are telling the American public what a crook our president really is. How many fucking crooked things he's done. How many lies he's...
What do you do when you fuck up? When you fuck up on a demonstrably large scale? You acknowledge, first and foremost, for your own sake and not for others that you fucked up, and then get your shit together. At least that's what society expects from most of us, and that's what I believe most of us believe in. But not CNN, apparently. After failing demonstrably during the last US presidential elections, failing not only to objectively report on issues, but failing on upholding any standard of journalistic integrity. Do you remember that moment on Morning Joe after the presidential election when Joe Scarborough acknowledged the fact that the media of the United States had stopped being journalists and had begun becoming cheerleaders, consequently being out of touch with where the country was actually going and alienating themselves as well? One would have thought that after acknowledging this flaw, after acknowledging that mistake, that one of the main and biggest offenders of this kind of cheerleading coverage, that being CNN, would have learned its lesson, would have, sat back, reflected a little, and tried to figure a way to maybe work with a little more integrity in the future. But no, let's just keep on going as we went before.
How many fucking unsavory characters he's involved with? How many fucking times that he has chosen to go with the fucking unsavory element instead of addressing the needs of the American public. CNN's the babyface. Trump is the heel in real life because everybody knows this shit's true. Everybody except this is the, help me work through this, Brian. This could be an on-air therapy session. Here's what we know to be facts. We know to be facts that Donald Trump has told at least one lie every day he has been in office as president. We know that Donald Trump is woefully in over his head. He doesn't know how any of this shit works. He's unprepared to be a goddamn county fucking clerk, much less president of the United States. He's a national embarrassment. Every time he opens his mouth, the people that he associates with, the people he surrounds himself with, are bad for the country, bad for the legal system, bad for everything, except billionaires. If you're a billionaire, you're looking fucking good. The Republicans are goddamn in a state of such disarray that they cannot even, they've had 8 years to repeal and replace Obamacare.
Just when you thought CNN couldn't stoop any lower, that they weren't already completely morally bankrupt, they went and found a way to stoop lower again. Well, the hashtag CNN Blackmail has been ranking on Twitter for a time, saying that he was inciting violence by using this meme when it was just a joke. Geez, I've seen a hell of a lot worse than that. And he says that they made him say, I think they put a lot of words into his mouth. He says, I have the highest respect for the journalist community. CNN aren't journalists, that's for sure. Solo then issued a lengthy apology saying the meme was created purely as satire and was not meant to call violence against CNN or any other news affiliation. Well, because violence didn't happen as well, I think it's fairly obvious. You don't need to apologise for satire. But hey, if you live in the UK, live in Scotland, for example, it's the times we live in, you can potentially go to jail for jokes. Just ask Count Dankula. But this is the court of public opinion, according to CNN. And they're being judge, jury, and executioner here.
In other words, they've had 8 years to figure out a way that they could palatably take away tens of millions of people's health care, reward the insurance companies, give big tax breaks to the rich, and fuck the poor, and fuck the middle class, and downgrade the quality of everybody's health care. They've had 8 years to figure out how to do that. They haven't done it yet. Trump, he hasn't built a wall, which was foolishness. I mean, all the stuff. Everybody that has cognitive function and the ability to discern the smell of roses from bullshit knows what Donald Trump is. He's a fraud, a liar, a con man, and a dangerous fucking human being. CNN is trying to tell the American public exactly that. The ones that haven't figured it out yet. But somehow, through the artistry that he learned in pro wrestling, Donald Trump can make it look like CNN is the heel and he's the babyface and he's beating up CNN and people pop. How the fuck does that work?
Well, I don't know who's popping for. I mean, I mean, everyone realizes what's going on, I think.
No, they don't. No, they don't, because, well, for one thing, one of the newscasters, by the way, I watched the news, played it over and over. One of the newscasters said, well, this is a clip of someone who looks like Donald Trump tackling a man, and the CNN logo is, super. He couldn't bring himself to believe that a guy who's been elected president of the United States would have actually done a fucking wrestling angle.
CNN reserves the right to publish his identity should any of that change. Wait a minute, though. Didn't the mainstream media just throw a giant tism fit on social media talking about how this was a direct threat against them by Trump? That by posting that GIF, they were making a threat against journalists? I must be misunderstanding something, because what I've just read here on CNN's fucking website is a pretty clear and direct fucking threat against this particular individual. Should he change his mind at any point and not feel remorseful for making a GIF that mocks their stupid fucking news organization, they're going to publicly dox him after he said that it would put his personal safety at risk. It's almost like there's a word for that. There's this word that was created a long time ago for forcing somebody to do something you want them to do by holding something over their head, that if they don't obey what you say, you'll use it to, what is it? Oh, blackmail. Blackmail them. That's the fucking word I'm thinking of.
He's still got a 40% approval rating. 40% of the people in the United States of America cannot figure out a goddamn idiot and a bullshit artist when he's standing in front of them. And this is what amazes me. Donald Trump has learned from his brief flirtation with wrestling and probably his years as a goddamn real estate con man, that facts don't matter. It's what people believe, as Vince says. And Vince has a lot more similarities to Trump than I thought. Perception is reality.
Real news